Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Robbie Rhino, and in today's video I'm going to be reviewing the tank you see before you. It's the latest premium tank to enter the World of Tanks battlefield. It's the Chieftain Hybrid 120. It's an Era 2 British premium Western Alliance heavy tank. It's got a 120mm gun. Clue is in the name. It's a very fast firing 120mm gun with a pretty astonishing alpha damage, and we'll get onto the stats of this tank in just a bit. But it's also got some very nice mobility as well. So we'll compare in this review to 3 other Era 2 heavy tanks to see how the stats hold up. We'll have a look at my equipment and commander setup and how I like to run this tank and how that affects the base stats. And then we'll have a look at the armour profile because it differs slightly from the Chieftain Mark V, which is the highest Era 2 tech tree British heavy tank you can get in the Western Alliance tech tree. And yeah, we'll compare the tanks. We'll run down the stats and then we'll get into some gameplay at the end. But if you want to know a little bit about the Chieftain Hybrid 120 here on the article about this tank on the World of Tanks console website, it's based on a real life project to make parts of the British FV for 201 Chieftain and American T95 tanks interchangeable. So it's a pretty interesting tank, and it's kind of half based in reality. Obviously it's a project that it doesn't come into fruition in the end, but yeah, it's still nice to have that little bit of history behind it. First, we're going to have a little look down here at the price of the Chieftain Hybrid 120, and as an Era 2 premium tank on release, it's going to be relatively expensive, so you're going to want to know if you want to pick this thing up. The Chieftain Hybrid 120 primed bundle, which comes with equipment, premium time and boosters, is 16,500 gold. And the fully loaded bundle is 14,500 gold. That's just the premium time and boosters, and if you want just the tank on its own, 12,900 gold, which is a fair price. It's the same kind of price as other tanks have been introduced at, and if it's as good as the stats say it is, then you'll probably definitely want this if you are a DPM enthusiast and you love having DPM on your tanks and you don't mind foregoing a little bit of armour. In terms of what it looks like, here's some screenshots from the article here of the Hybrid 120. It looks like a Chieftain and it behaves like a Chieftain. Very nice DPM, great accuracy, but this thing does have better mobility than you've seen on any Chieftain before, and it's pretty damn tasty indeed. So we're gonna have a look at the stats of the Hybrid 120 over here on Excel, where I've put all of the stats of the Chieftain Hybrid 120 on the left. Then we've got the tech tree or Western Alliance Era 2 heavy tank, the Chieftain Mark V, the Eastern Alliance T72 AV, and of course the FV4211, just to give it a good overall impression of how the stats hold up to these other tanks, because they're similar. Era 2 heavy tanks, same kind of caliber of gun, they're going to be fighting each other, same hit points, yada yada yada, and it's a good indication of how the Chieftain Hybrid 120 will perform for you. Just before we get going, if you haven't seen my reviews before, green's the best stat, red is the worst, and orange is somewhere in between, and the ones highlighted in yellow is with my updated stats with my commander and equipment setup applied, and I'll talk you through that a little later on. But we're going to start first with the hit points and the view range of the Chieftain Hybrid 120, and as you can see, it does have the joint worst hit points at 2,950, but that's not really too bad of an issue. As it's a sort of top level Era 2 heavy tank, you're going to be able to take multiple rounds. It's only 100 less than the Chieftain Mark V, and it's 50 less than the FV4211, so nothing too big to worry about there, and a big slug of hit points to take some rounds during the battle. And it does have best in class view range at 490 meters, very nice on a heavy tank. You don't really have to worry about pushing that up because you're going to be playing a support kind of role to your more heavily armoured heavy tanks and making your gun work at mid ranges. But of course that does get boosted up with commander and equipment setup and consumables, and I'll explain how I got that figure a little bit later on, but as you can see, better than the Chieftain Mark V, much better than the T72 AV and the FV4211. So now we're going to get on to one of the best aspects about this tank, and it's the mobility, and you don't often associate mobility with the Chieftains in World of Tanks console, but this thing has a whopping 1000 horsepower engine and a 22.24 power to weight ratio, 65.2 kilometers an hour forwards, a fantastic 24.1 kilometers an hour in reverse. Your whole traverse is very nice indeed at 44 degrees a second, and your turret traverse is a little bit lacking, but you can boost that up with gun handling skills at 38 degrees a second. So apart from the turret traverse, everything is best in class, and as you can see, it outshines the Chieftain Mark V and the FV4211 by some way, and even the very fast T72 AV it beats in these stats, so a big plus point for the Chieftain Hybrid 120. And now we're going to get on to the gun, and as I suggested at the start of the video, it uses a 120mm gun, as the name suggests, the same as on the Chieftain Mark V and the FV4211, and the T72 AV fires a slightly higher caliber 125mm gun. So definitely bear that in mind during this comparison. What ammunition do you fire on the Hybrid 120? Well, it fires APDS as standard, APF SDS as its premium ammunition choice, and lovely HESH rounds that have nice penetration as well. In terms of the penetration of your standard rounds, 418mm of penetration, which is pretty nice for a premium tank, and that goes up to 483mm of penetration with the premium APF SDS rounds, and it has a fantastic 290mm of HESH penetration. And if you're wondering about the alpha damages, well, it's better than the tech tree version, the Chieftain Mark V. You have 530 alpha damage on your standard and premium rounds, and if you can penetrate those lovely HESH rounds, it boosts it up to 680 damage. And if you'll see in just a bit, we'll talk about the DPM of this tank, you can be racking up insane amounts of damage very quickly indeed if you are penetrating those rounds. In terms of the speed of the rounds, it's good news as well. 1530 meters a second shell velocity on your standard and your premium APDS and APF SDS rounds, and it's over half less on the HESH rounds. It's 660 meters a second, so definitely bear that in mind if you're firing at mid to long ranges, but up close they should work pretty well for you if you give plenty of lead. Things to note from this comparison then in terms of the guns: the shell velocity is the same as on the Chieftain Mark V, and it's the same shell velocity as the premium rounds on the FV4211. In terms of penetration, it's joint best in class with the Chieftain Mark V, better than the FV4211 by some way, and even better than the APF SDS rounds on the T72 AV. The T72 AV itself fires heat as its premium ammunition choice and has ATGMs as its third ammunition choice, so bear that in mind, which means the T72 AV does have the best in class penetration with those heat rounds. However, you have to bear in mind it's very hard to penetrate heat in Era 2 of Cold War due to all of the spaced armour and protection against HE, heat and ATGM, so I'd rather have APF SDS like you have on the Hybrid 120. So in my opinion, that's a plus point for the Hybrid 120. As you can see that here, it doesn't quite have the best alpha damage in this comparison. It's 20 off of the T72 AV, but remember that is a 125mm gun, so yeah, you're having a pretty astonishing alpha damage with the Hybrid 120 on a 120mm gun. And those HESH rounds are absolutely beautiful. It has the same speed as the HESH rounds on the FV4211 and on the Chieftain Mark V, but for some reason it has 680 alpha damage on them instead of the 605 on those other two British tanks. So yeah, a premium tank has better alpha damage, DPM, you get the picture. Yeah, but I'm not going to be complaining because it's pretty damn nice, and it's a very good all-round picture for the Hybrid 120. Lastly, in terms of shell velocity, you can see here it has joint best in terms of its shell velocity on its APF SDS rounds, and of course the HESH rounds will have better shell velocity than the ATGMs on the T72AV. The best in class on standard penetration shell velocity is the T72AV at 1785 meters a second, but it's pretty damn nice. 1530 meters a second means you don't have to give too much lead at any kind of distance, and it's very nice for snapshotting and firing very quickly at targets that are on the move. So yeah, pretty good news for this 120mm gun, and it only gets better from here on out as we look at the gun handling and the DPM of the Hybrid 120. So in terms of aim time, you can see here that the best in class goes to the Chieftain Mark V and the FV4-11 at 1.5 seconds. The Hybrid 120 is only 0.2 seconds behind at 1.7 seconds, much better than the T72AV, so the Western Alliance coming out on top there. And in terms of the accuracy, you have a fantastic 0.27 accuracy on the Hybrid 120, best in this comparison, better than the Chieftain Mark V at 0.29, and much better than the T72AV and the FV4-11. And now we get on to my favourite stat of this tank, and that's the DPM. You have a base DPM shy, or just shy of 4,000 at 3,975 base DPM. Absolutely astonishing. About 700 more than the T72AV. Much better than the Chieftain Mark V, and better than the FV4-11. So this thing absolutely shreds with this 120mm gun. In terms of your reload, when you don't have a commander and equipment setup applied, it's 8 seconds. You carry 50 rounds of ammunition, which I can foresee will be a little bit of a problem in more drawn out battles, so definitely watch out for that. And you have the joint best in class gun depression and gun elevation, the same as on the Chieftain Mark V, and you have the same elevation as the FV4-11, where that only has 9 degrees of gun depression, so one less. And all three of those tanks beat the Eastern Alliance T72AV, which only has 6 degrees gun depression and 14 degrees of gun elevation. So what can you gather from this? You have insane accuracy. You're foregoing a little bit of aim time for that crazy accuracy and that crazy DPM. You have brilliant gun depression and elevation. You're going to have to worry a little bit about your ammunition count, but you also have that very nice mobility as well. Enough hit points to take a shot, and all in all, you're pretty much better than the Tech Tree Chieftain Mark V, according to the stats, so we're going to have to see what the Armour says about that. But before we get on to what the Armour says about that, let's have a look at my commander and equipment setup and what I choose to run on the Chieftain Hybrid 120. In terms of my equipment, I run improved ventilation, advanced loader and traction system. And in terms of my commander skills, I run Sixth Sense, Born Leader, Rapid Loading, Steady Aim, Rapid Aim, Snapshot, Run and Gun, Armour Angling, and Track Mechanic. So in terms of my equipment, I am trying to make the Hybrid 120 as good a DPM as possible, and also boosting my top speed and traverse speeds, and with the commander skills, improving the gun handling stats so I can invest in my equipment to boost the mobility and the DPM. Armour Angling is going to help reduce the amount of damage we're taking, and yeah, Track Mechanic is going to be able to keep our tracks on because we don't have great armour or reliable armour on the Hybrid 120. So if you choose to run the same setup as me, you'll be looking at a view range of 542 meters, which is more than enough for a support heavy tank. And in terms of the mobility, your top forward speed and your reverse speed will have gone up to 71.72 kilometers an hour and 26.51 kilometers an hour respectively. Your whole traverse will have gone from 44 to 48.4 degrees a second, and that pretty poor turret traverse will have improved dramatically to 47.35 degrees a second. So that means your turret and your hull will move at practically the same speed. Very good for when people are circling you and you're trying to get your gun around on them. And in terms of the gun handling and DPM, aim times dropped to 1.53 seconds, an insane accuracy of 0.21, a DPM of 5,592, which really does shred your opponents. And for one shell of either 530 alpha damage or 680 with the Hesh, I reload now in 5.69 seconds. Bear in mind that this is with a consumable of combat rations. If you were using something like hole patch kit or smoke, this will decrease the gun handling and the DPM ever so slightly. But that's the setup that I run and you're going to be seeing in the gameplay. Feel free to tweak that how you will. We're now going to hop on over to the garage, have a look at the armor viewer and the armor layout of the Hybrid 120. Then we're going to get stuck into the gameplay. So we're now in the garage having a look at the armour layout of the Chieftain Hybrid 120. I don't have the Chieftain Mark 5 fully upgraded, so I can't tell you if they are identical, but they are very similar, and I'll tell you what I know of the Hybrid 120. So the thickest part of the armour is 350mm. This is this bit here underneath the gun, and any gun on a medium or heavy tank fully upgraded is likely to go through that, so that's a very easy shot. And then you have these sections here ranging from 250, 215 and 175mm, all going backwards on this sloped rounded turret in that famous Chieftain style turret. The base thickness levels aren't great. Of course there is an effective armour value because of the angling, but I definitely wouldn't recommend sitting in front of tanks, especially fully upgraded heavy tanks, tank destroyers and medium tanks, because they're likely to go straight through the front of this tank. You've got to play it more like a support style heavy tank. You have hit points to take shots when needed to trade because of your great DPM, and hopefully I'll talk about that in the gameplay if I remember. The only other thing I want to talk about in terms of the armour, or the only other two things I want to talk about, is you've got a cupola which can be seen on a ridge line, and I believe the cupola here is 60mm thick, so that's a nice easy weak point on a ridge. If you haven't got much of the turret to shoot, that's going to be easy to go through. And now I want to talk about the side armour, and it's a little bit of a weird one with the Chieftain Hybrid 120 because I can't get an exact figure for the whole front sort of half of this tank, because there's different sections of armour. You've got 78mm here, you've got 71mm in different portions on the side there, and you've got 50.8mm there. The one thing I want to draw your attention to is this section towards the back here at 48mm, and that's the end point of the good side armour where you can side scrape against gun caliber similar to the Chieftain Hybrid 120. For instance, this section here, which is the rear of the tank, or the rear sort of third of the tank if you will, this is going to be overmatched by all 94mm caliber guns or higher due to the overmatch rule. So this thing's good at side scraping unless it's getting shot by a high caliber gun at the rear of the tank, so you definitely want to be wary of that if you're side scraping. And if this thing is side scraping against you and you've got a 94mm caliber gun or higher, this will overmatch this section of the tank and it will be a pretty easy shot to go through. The only other thing that I can show you really is the sections on the front of this tank. It's 76mm lower plate, very easy regardless of the angle, unless you're shooting at an angle like this, in which case you should just be shooting at the side. Be warned that to shoot and track this thing from the front, you have got to shoot slightly inwards than the outermost part of the tracks due to the modelling, just to make sure you go through the drive wheel and track it, and I hope that makes sense. But apart from that, there's really not much else to talk about in this armour. Section here of 95mm on the upper hull. Again, that's going to be penetrated, especially if you're looking down on it, unless you're angling it at an extreme angle. So you're going to bounce occasional rounds due to the angling, but you can't rely on it. You've got to play that support style gameplay, and that's how to get the most out of this tank, because the 350mm at the thickest part with no space protection there is going to be very easy to go through. So that's it talking about the Chieftain Hybrid 120. We're now going to get stuck into the first of the gameplays. So we're now into the first of 4 gameplays in today's video in the Chieftain Hybrid 120, and we are here on Great Wall, so we're going to use the excellent mobility of this tank to get into position early on. We're going to go to the position in G3, G4 on these hills where we can use our 10 degrees of gun depression and put the insane DPM to work. So this was maybe my second or third game in the tank, I believe, and it was in this game towards the end where I realised how damn good this DPM is and how well people are going to play this tank and how powerful it will be on the battlefield. And in these gameplays, of which there are 4, like I've said, you're going to see the insane capabilities of this tank, and I think it's slightly overtuned in my opinion. I wouldn't say overpowered. It hasn't got crazy spaced armour like the FV4-211, it's just got crazy firepower which allows it to shred its opponents. You have got to play slightly further back than the heavies which are taking the hits for you, and then you can just put your gun to work and use your DPM. So here on the ridgeline in Great Wall, you can see 10 degrees is more than enough to use a pretty large ridgeline, and we're just going to put round after round into these unsuspecting enemies, and sometimes they're suspecting and there's nothing you can do about it. We're using the distraction of the medium and heavy tanks to our left, and we're just pummeling round after round into them. This DPM is insane. To have this alpha damage on a 120mm gun of 530 and 680 alpha damage with your Hesh rounds, it's absolutely crazy. And within the first couple of minutes of the battle, we're up to 3000 damage and 293 assistance. It's still only 1 tank taken out at this point, which is quite unusual, especially for a Cold War game that's usually fast paced, lots of kills very quickly. But we are being capped, and it's me and the medium tank behind me saying thank you, which is very kind to Squidgy. Shout out to you if you're watching. We've gone back to defend the capture circle, and you can see the insane mobility of the Chieftain. This is what every other Chieftain variant in World of Tanks console is missing. This fantastic mobility and the ability to get to where it needs to be if something like this is happening and we are being capped. We have managed to reset the capture circle. This Stingray is realising it's pointless just sitting there now, so we're going to put our gun to work, try and keep hidden using the hard cover and getting round after round into these tanks. We can fire through this destructible cover, and we're trying to get a little bit of a ram on this Stingray, which we did, finish him off subsequently, and now we can reload in very quick time to take out that Magak 5, and Squidgy helps us out there. In a very quick brawl there, we managed to boost our damage total to 6.6k direct damage. Now we are up by 1 tank. There's no threat or no current threat of us being capped out. We can sit back at mid-range and get some shots downrange here along the 1 line and try and put out as much damage as possible. And you can see when you stop, the aim time is absolutely phenomenal. The accuracy is absolutely insane. And the accuracy on the move, if you use run and gun as a commander skill, is so damn good. And this gun is so effective. And in that minute where I've just been talking about the gun, we've already boosted from 6k to 8k, and given the right circumstances, if the enemies present themselves to you, if you have a little bit of support that allows you to play this support kind of gameplay, you can really get some good damage numbers. I've gotten very close to 10k quite a few times now in a session, which has lasted me about 1.5 to 2 hours, very consistently doing between 6 and 9k damage, and even some extra assistance in these games as well, and lots of kills. And of course you'll be seeing 3 other gameplays as well as this one. It's all about just situating yourself, using distractions, popping out, using your DPM. If you get hit by someone, you know that you can usually put 2 rounds in for every one they are firing at you, especially if they're using a larger caliber gun. And yeah, it's just an all-in insane DPM tank with great mobility, and it just forgoes that armour to be one of those frontline brawlers, but that doesn't really matter with this tank. You are able to do insane things with it. Basically, it's just so good, and you can see the mobility here going up the hill on Great Wall. We're gonna try and find the last remaining tank, which is a Sheridan, I believe. We've loaded the Hesh rounds because we can penetrate the Sheridan with Hesh. It's just a bit it depends where we shoot it. Basically, the Attrax might absorb it, but I wanted to give it a go and get a nice juicy 680 alpha damage roll. So we've come here to the middle. It doesn't take long at all to search for a tank at the end of the game with this mobility. You're as fast as, you know, or faster than most of the other medium and heavy tanks, which is unusual for a Chieftain variant. And that means that I'm able to continue the commentary and not cut the commentary off whilst we search for this Sheridan, who does get spotted near our base, which is a bit annoying as we've come all this way. But we're going to get back and see if we manage to pick up some extra damage towards the end of this game. You can see here it's just so nimble. The traverse speeds, especially if you use a traction system, are so good. You're able to get around the battlefield, avoid fire that way, and it's a fantastic tank. It's the best heavium in Era 2 in my opinion. It's even better than the 2AV due to the penetration and the alpha damage. So we get a shell there. We only track the Sheridan with our Hesh round, which is a little bit unfortunate for us. A little bit hesitant there. I thought he was going to reverse back out, but unfortunately that will be the last little bit of damage, that splash on the Sheridan. If we did penetrate, we'd be close to 10k damage there, but the T-55 Enigma takes down the game for us, and we finish with 5 tanks left on the battlefield. And in the Chieftain Hybrid 120 we finish in second place with a profit of 253,000 silver. That's just a first class badge on the day one, showing you how well this tank is being played. 1542 base experience points, 3 kills, 9.2k direct damage and 293 assistance. And that's not it, the games get better from here on out, so we're going to head on into the second one now. So now you're joining me in the second of today's gameplays in the Chieftain Hybrid 120. We're a minute into this battle and we are on Dukla Pass. For the first minute we were just traversing into this position where everyone likes to have a good brawl out, and we can put our 10 degrees of gun depression and our DPM to use just like we did in the last gameplay on Great Wall. And this is how you play this tank. You find ridgelines, you find rocks and things like this to hide behind, you peek over, you expose as little of your turret as possible, and you play this supporting kind of heavy tank gameplay slash medium tank, or heavium if you will. You support your heavy tanks that are taking the hits, and towards the later stages of the battle you are able to take a hit and try and use your armour effectively, angle and wiggle your turret around when you're on a ridge line. And unfortunately the armour isn't brilliant, but the trade-off for this fantastic 120mm gun with the high alpha damage, high DPM, good penetration and this mobility is definitely a trade-off worth taking. And it's all about getting into these positions and just letting loose, getting as many shots as possible. Don't be afraid to get into a position where you might get shot. You know, you've got to get forward and use this gun and make the most of this DPM, because it's what this tank is all about. You have the ability, like we did there, to track a tank in place, and you reload it so quickly you can get another one before they've repaired and gotten away. And in very quick spaces of time you really do pick up the damage very, very nicely indeed. So in terms of the penetration and how I'm feeling about the penetration when I've been in battles on this tank, well, the standard penetration feels more than enough in most scenarios. The T-55 Enigma and the FV4-211 are a little bit of a problem. With the FV4-211 you're going to want to fire on the upper hole, and there's a little square bit underneath the gun and underneath the gun mantlet. I will do a video on weak spots hopefully very soon, but you're able to penetrate the whole of an FV4-211. You can go through the drive wheel and the rear of a T-55 Enigma, and with this accuracy you're able to snipe at weak spots very, very reliably, fire on the move reliably, and you can adjust your position very well indeed. As you saw there, we went past a position where we're able to get past a shot into that Conqueror. We managed to reverse very quickly, get a shot off and then zoom forwards, and having this mobility does mean that you can lead the charge where necessary. You can get to where you need to be on the battlefield and you're able to have massive impacts. And again, we are being captured like we were in the last gameplay. Whilst we're on the move, we're going to try and get as much damage as possible on enemy tanks. Unfortunately, we lazily auto-aim there on the front of that T-72 AV, I believe it was. But we're going to try and get as many shots here on the move as possible. Get a lovely one there, and you can see with run and gun, this thing is very accurate in mid to short ranges on the move. The capture circle is being capped. We only have 22 seconds now left to try and save the game for our team. There's a very good light tank player I've seen in many battles in an AMX 13 SS 11 TCA, also racing towards the capture circle. He spots out the heavy tank that is situated in the capture circle and puts a massive ATGM into him. We panic a little bit and go for the T72M1 when I really should have gone for a different tank to reset the capture points on a different tank, but it doesn't matter because the DPM is so good. We're managing to put round after round into these tanks in front of us. We reset on the T72M1 and the Object 120, and we're just going to try and take one tank out of the game and focus on the next. And by this time, our teammates have come to help us. We unfortunately take an ATGM from that Object 934, but we've preserved our hit points well enough to take that hit, manage to take out the 120, and the enemy light tank gets taken out, which means we do have a victory where in a slower tank we might not have got back in time and helped our light tank to reset the cap, and we finished that game with a mastery badge, 9.1k direct damage, 1.2k assistance, 1400 blocked and 4 kills with a lovely profit of 282,000 silver, showing you just how damn good this tank is. And there's still 2 games left to show you, and they do get slightly higher in their combined damage, so we're going to head on into the third one now. Right now you are joining me in the third gameplay, and we are again on Dukla Pass in the exact same position we were in the last gameplay. I've seen this map so many times in my play session, a little bit annoying, but we're going to have another good result on Dukla Pass. We spent the first minute and a half of this battle getting into position, and we've started to put our gun to work using the 10 degrees of gun depression, popping up, getting a shell off, and using the great reverse speed to get some shells downrange, down towards the south of the map, and the tanks that are situated sniping on the enemy team. There's an opportunity here for a nice crossfire on this Maguk 5, so we move forward, constantly just scanning the horizon to see if anyone's got shots on us. This T72 AV does, so we fire a chancy shot on the move there. As we go into reverse, we manage to hit because of the great accuracy and using run and gun, just to reiterate how good that skill is, especially on light tanks, but on this tank as well. And I'm just looking now to the right to see if I'm able to get a different position on these tanks that are situated below us. There's this rock here that I've used in the last gameplay I might be able to get to. I don't want to lose too many hit points to get into that position, but whilst our tank has gone in, our light tank, we can use his distraction to put round after round, and before this light tank gets taken out, we've put 3 to sort of 6 rounds into various tanks, and there's just no other tank you could be able to do that with in Era 2 of the Cold War game mode. It's just an insane DPM, and it's so fun to use. It's going to be annoying to come up against and annoying to be pummeled by them. I think that a lot of players will probably get into positions very early on and get overexcited with the gun and how good it is and probably get themselves taken out very quickly, but the player bases, if they learn and they take their time, people are going to play this exceptionally well, and it's going to be one of the more popular tanks in Era 2. And if you're a slightly more experienced player or a veteran, or you're just a very, very good player of the game, this is going to be a tank you really will like. The DPM, the alpha damage, the mobility, the penetration, it's all there for you to have absolutely epic games and rake in the silver. What I didn't mention during the review was the bonuses of this tank, as it is a premium tank. The silver bonus is 55%. You get an XP bonus of 20% and a commander XP bonus of 10%, which is very, very nice as well. You get the 5% free XP bonus. So yeah, playing this tank, it's a lot of fun. You're very powerful and you're going to make a lot of XP and silver, and also be able to train up a crew as well. So we're in this central location here, or slightly towards the south central here on Dukla Pass, and we're just getting long range fire at tanks that are crossing the north. We've got this ridgeline in front of us we can always fall back from, or go forward to these rocks if we start taking fire. Just keeping an eye on this VT2 which is behind us, making sure we don't get taken out from the rear. But I'm trying to take out these tanks whilst they are distracted. and I'm not going to try and lose too many hit points at this stage in the battle. I'm a little bit tempted at the moment to go all in and go forward. I was hoping that the enemy team would push a little bit sooner, but as soon as I get spotted from the rear, it's now my time to go. Stop, aim time there, beautiful, doesn't take too long, and we take out the T-72A. And now I'm just going to use my mobility to go all in and just do it myself. Come up behind this FE-4-11 and start putting rounds into him. I seem to notice, there's sometimes a blockade on these maps where a tank like the FE-4-11 or a T-55 Enigma is just facing frontally towards the enemy, and they're all just sat in front of him. All it takes is one person to come round, distract the tank, which has fantastic armour, and make them turn, and it makes them weak for your opponents. Or if they don't turn, it allows you to put round after round into them. So we've obliged by putting round after round into the rear of that FE-4-11. And now we're going to see if we can get some nice fire at these tanks that are ahead of us on the G line. We get a lovely shot there into the drive wheel of the FE-4-11, and we damage his ammo rack or kill his loader, one or the other. And now we're going to use this building to side scrape off of and see if we're able to block some rounds but also put some rounds down range. Unfortunately, we do get penetrated there. Although they are higher than us, it will mean that they are able to get shots down on the engine deck and the front of my hull if I side scrape out a little bit too far. But I've got a few hit points to play with, and we're just trying to get as many shots in as possible. So in terms of ammunition and what I start with, you can see that I kind of carry half and half of premium APF SDS and standard APDS rounds, and also I carry, I believe it is 5 HESH rounds per battle, so that allows me to deal with a range of scenarios. I mean, I could take less premium rounds, but the fact that you're making so much silver, even if you fire the premium rounds, as long as you're penetrating them, it just means that you're ultra flexible on the battlefield, and it means you're able to deal with T-55 Enigmas, FE-4-11s, and tanks at long range, because remember, you will lose penetration over distance with the APDS and the APF SDS rounds, so that's definitely something to bear in mind. It's not too bad for snapshotting. As you can see, we auto-aim there at that leopard that poked over. I wouldn't recommend doing it all the time, because sometimes you do things like that. It aims for the centre mass, and I believe I either bounced off a weird angle or I managed to hit the rock. But if you're circling a tank, if you are en route to a different position, you can always auto-aim on the move, get a shot in, and with the run and gun, with the fantastic accuracy on the move, it means that you're able to be very effective whilst you are traversing into a different location. So now we're here on Dukla Pass in G7. We are up by 3 tanks, and we're just going to try and get some shots in on these heavy tanks here. We pull round, try and get one up into the lower plate of the FE-4-11. Unfortunately we miss, but we turn around and get one into the side of the other FE-4-11 who is fighting our teammate. He gets taken out, and now we can just turn our attention to the tank above us here on the right. I'm trying to bait him round for my friendly tank to get a shot into him, but it looks like we're just going to have to play chicken with him, and I'm going to wait for a moment where I feel like he's distracted, and I'm going to pop up and get a shot into that weak point on the upper plate there, that little square you can see below the gun, and we're going to try and take this tank out. I don't know why I fired at the front of the turret there, that was a bad shot, but we reload so quickly in this tank, it doesn't matter, and we've got plenty of ammunition to take out this last remaining tank. And then again, fire through the upper plate there, and he gets taken out by our friendly Leopard 1A1, showing you, this is just what this tank does. It absolutely demolishes people on the battlefield. That's an insane game for a player like me. I consider that a very good game. 10k is always obviously the target to get, and you always feel good regardless of whether it's Cold War or World War II, but 9.5k direct damage, 1024 assistance, and 2 kills is only a first class badge, showing you just how good this tank is, and that's 246,000 silver. So now we're going to head on into the 4th and final game. This was 10.5k combined. The next one's going to be even higher than this, so I'll see you over there. So welcome to the fourth and final gameplay of today's video. We are here on Pearl River, about 30 seconds into the battle. We've got into this central location where we have shots to all four corners of the map before anyone else. We've noticed this T-55 Enigma has come up. He's obviously not expecting anyone to be here, but we're going to use his distraction to pop round and get a nice juicy 506 damage to start off the battle. And for the next 30 seconds to a minute, I'm going to play a little bit bad, really. This is poor gameplay. I should know really where to shoot. I'm trying to go for the tracking shot through the drive wheel, but he's slightly angled, meaning it's going to be a difficult shot. And I was hoping the teammates behind me would be able to use my distraction to get a couple of rounds into the T-55 Enigma, but we've got plenty of hit points. This just shows you how durable it is, even though it doesn't have good armour or armour that is useful in most scenarios. We've fallen back, got re-stealthed, and we're just waited for that T-55 Enigma to get distracted, come round, and we try to go through that drive wheel shot again, keep him in place. It's a good place to shoot if you're from the side of a T-55 Enigma. It means that you're going to have side shots and you can bypass all of their spaced armour on the front. Unfortunately, we didn't manage to track him in place. And now we're going to use the free camera to see where he is, and once he's fired we're going to pop round, get a shot through with a premium round, and then we're going to make him back up. Whilst he's backing up, I don't want to go further down that road because I can get shot from the south. I'm instead going to turn round and see if I can get shots at anyone towards the south, and maybe then turn around and turn our focus to the 1 and 2 lines down the western side at the enemies that are pushing our capture circle. But here this T-72 AV tries to run away, and he does essentially run away in the end, but not before we put 1,000 damage into him in very quick succession. And then we have enough time to finish off that T-55 Enigma before we have to duck out of the way and get into cover. And now in this central location, which is fantastic, we don't have to move very far at all to be able to get shots in down this 1 and 2 line at the tanks that are pushing our tanks that are defending our capture circle. It's a very close game. There's only one tank in it, but hopefully the damage that we're able to dish out very quickly here will be able to turn the tide of this battle. So we've taken out the Leopard that was on top there, and now we're just going to cut round after round into this FV-4211, who obviously seems to think he's invincible, but from this position slightly underneath we should be able to go through again and again the lower plate of this FV-4211, and every time we fired we're falling back, trying to expose as little of our tank as possible so that we don't take any extra unnecessary damage like we did earlier with the T-55 Enigma. And now we're going to see if we can get shots at anyone else crossing this path. We fire at the 120. I don't think I gave quite enough lead, and then we're going to fire again, and as luck would happen, we fire into the dead wreck, meaning that we fired 2 shots there, did no damage, but we did hit a nice dead wreck. Unfortunately for that Mobat, we fire at him and penetrate him as we reload within 5.7 seconds, and now we're going to try and defend our capture circle from this location in the center of the map. And it's a great location for a tank that has to do some support work, and you can also defend the capture circle from here. So we get a shot there at the VT2, and before he manages to turn his turret round, get a shot at us, we have reversed out of the way. And now we're going to see if we can get some shots in at this T-55 Enigma, and we miss our first one, but the DPM has blessed us and we can get another one into him, and maybe a final one. I was going for a tracking shot there, hoping it would loop down into the tracks, track him in place, but unfortunately we are going to have to push forward as we are getting our base captured. They are spotted in the cap, so hopefully someone will be able to get a round in. I'm going to switch to the Hesh rounds, see if we can splash a target, reset their capture points. Going to try and do the same thing again. It's a little bit tricky as I know we will be targeted here, but I think now is the time just to push forward, and I feel like I've done it a little bit too late here. There's 2 seconds left on the capture circle 1, and we managed to get some spotting assistance there. and some lovely person on our team manages to reset the base, and we're just going to keep the vision up on the tanks here in the capture circle, and our WZ122 puts an ATGM in there and finishes the VT2 off. Again, just popping up, getting some spotting assist on the people that are capturing our base. And now we're going to be aware of our surroundings, get a shot into the FV4-11, and unfortunately before I could reverse out of the ray, the FV4-11 just nudges us, showing you it's not an extremely heavy tank, and you will be rammed for more by heavier tanks. However, we still managed to take that one down with a first class mastery badge, 1512 base experience points, 8.5k direct damage, nearly 8.6, 2.1k assistance. This is a game which is a 10.7k damage combined game, and it just goes to show you how powerful this tank is and this fantastic support role that you can play with the Chieftain Hybrid 120. In a 5-minute battle and 50 seconds, we have dealt that 10.7k combined damage, picked up just shy of 300,000 silver, and this is basically all you need to know about this tank. The DPM is insane, the alpha damage and the penetration and mobility are all great as well. The only downside is that armour, but if you learn the positions to play this tank with, use the 10 degrees of gun depression, you'll go far, and it will be a very, very dangerous tank on the battlefield indeed. One of the new best tanks in Era 2, in my opinion, especially from the premium selection. So that's it for my review of the Chieftain Hybrid 120. I hope that you found it instructional and or enjoyable, and until next time, I'll see you on the battlefield, and bye for now.